Hallo ihr Lieben, hier ist wieder Julia, eure Ex-Grundschullehrerin und heute mit einem Interview mit Anna Dussault, die in England gerade in einem Guardian-Artikel ja, bekannt gemacht worden ist und die ein Buch rausbringt über Homeschooling und auch Unschooling, und wir haben ein wirklich interessantes Interview geführt, wo sie wirklich viel erzählt hat, viele Tipps auch gegeben hat für Eltern, die das vorhaben. Ich verlinke euch auch ihren Blog und ihre Homepage, worüber ihr dann zu dem Buch auch gelangt, was sie jetzt rausbringt. Und also ich fand es super inspirierend und ich weiß noch nicht genau, ob ich euch Untertitel drunter mache. Mal sehen. Also eventuell schreibe ich noch einen Blogpost über das Interview auf Deutsch dann. Das Interview ist halt auf Englisch, weil die Anna Französisch kann, aber kein Deutsch, und ich kein Französisch kann, und ich dachte, die meisten können Englisch. Also haben wir es natürlich auf Englisch versucht und es hat auch ganz gut geklappt. Ja, genau, also dann viel Spaß damit und bis zum nächsten Video. Ciao! Hello everyone! Today I'm very happy to be joined by Anna Dussault, a former teacher living in the UK, and she's got 3 kids, and she's the author of the book A Case for Homeschooling, and she's an unschooling mom, and it's very lovely to have you, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, Julia. Thank you for having me on.
How did you, as a teacher, get into homeschooling?
Well, I mean, it's a funny one. You know, now that I am homeschooling my kids, and when I look back at my own journey through education, my own feelings about education, I feel, on the one hand, I feel very surprised that I ever even tried to put my children into the school system. But on the other hand, I must say there is a certain advantage to it, even though I find it hard to understand and to grapple with why. I suppose for my children, on the plus side, they know what school is like. They've done school, they've done nursery school. And although it was not a hugely traumatic experience for them, they are clear that stations, oh, it's September, kids are going back to school. Is that okay with you guys? They know, they have their reference points. So that has worked for us. But having said that, you know, I had a very difficult journey through school myself. I was academically able and socially perfectly able, but I did not like school. I did not like the structure of school. I did not like the feeling of school. I always felt very oppressed. And so going into teaching is very hard to explain, and my journey through university was confusing as well. I think, like a lot of people, I just went to university, was just told to go to university because it's what you do. I just ended up feeling at the end of a treadmill of not really knowing what to do, and just, this is frankly a job that I'm overqualified for. I'm not saying that as if teaching is not that tough. That's what I'm saying. Teaching is not, other than in hours, a hugely academically demanding job. It's not like a university level. So if you've done a degree in it, of course you can teach it, is what I'm saying. Not that I'm some sort of genius at all. Just if you've done your degree, you can teach, no question. So in I went, and obviously it was a few quite tough schools that I worked in. So when my children started school, I was very critical of the school system. I didn't really consider any other option, but I was watching it always with quite a critical eye, and noticed lots of little things I didn't like, little things that went on in the playground that I felt were actually quite fundamentally a big deal, and that it worried me that my children were in this environment. But I would just make a note of my mind. It wasn't yet happening to my child. Homework immediately started, you know, age 4, spellings, phonics books, very low level, very boring, nothing like the books that we would normally take out of the library or read together at home, but nonetheless, in that process. So I would always say to the class teacher, look, you're in charge, you obviously know this method, you obviously know what to do. Anyway, fast forward, my daughter was a little bit bullied by some older girls. And this lasted about a week. And I know that sounds extreme. She was rudely spoken to a couple of times by some girls who were sort of known in the playground to be problematic with lots of children. It wasn't targeted towards my daughter. And then I asked the school to deal with it, and to deal with it quite firmly, because I think that no one should feel unsafe at school. And they didn't, which I knew they wouldn't, based on what I'd seen of school and based on what I know, that you just can't control these things in school. And 2 days later, she was stabbed with a pencil. And although in itself the incident was so short, I had so many little things all the way along the way that had been niggling me, worrying me, that I just sat down with my husband that evening and I just said, I don't think there's anything that I could say, that we could discuss with the head teacher here, that would change my mind. I don't want my child in this at all. And at that point, we weren't necessarily thinking homeschooling. We were just thinking, no, not this school, not this environment. Get her out. Let's homeschool for a year. And let's just see whether we can find a school that is a better fit for us. Can we do something extreme like remortgage the house and pay for private school? Not that I particularly think that would be better. Is there some kind of a less expensive but more our ethos Steiner school, Montessori school, something like this? Anyway, we started homeschooling, and within 2 weeks, my daughter, who didn't really like homework, didn't really like reading, wasn't really into spelling, was into everything. She started just picking up books that honestly were my books that I used for my research, and figuring out sentences for herself. If I came to sit down with her and do teachery stuff, she'd snap the book shut and just look at me like, I'm doing this, leave me. We met loads of other lovely people with lovely kids, really fun, really social. Of course, it's a shame now in COVID, it's not like that at all during the pandemic. But so social where we are, you know, in the UK, it's legal. So there are loads of families that do it, loads of clubs, loads of extracurricular. My son, who's only 4, you know, he was really starting to open his mind up too, and starting to show what a wonderful mathematician he is. Stuff that you know, he's 4. I would never have even dreamed of. I was just like, go and play in the sand, which he does, of course. But, you know, coming up towards Christmas of that first, you know, term of homeschooling, my husband and I just looked at each other and we were like, what would we send them to school for? I don't know what she's just done in a year of school that she can read, you know, some basic phonics at the end. But within a month of homeschooling, she was a fluent sort of secondary school level reader. And my husband, no, he can read and write. My son, I think, my son was beginning to form letters all of his own accord with absolutely zero adult input. We just decided we're going to roll with this. And of course, that's how the book evolved. I just became fascinated from a teaching perspective of how is this happening, you know, and that's how we ended up here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I worked at a we call it free school. And
yeah.
I thought it was amazing because they hardly did any, you know, academic work during the week.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, nearly as well equipped as the other kids. So yeah, same thing. Like we're not there yet with our kid, but yeah. So if it wasn't allowed in the UK, as you mentioned, like because in Germany it's not allowed to homeschool or to unschool, would you move to another country? What do you think?
So my husband's French and we speak French at home. And so we've always had in our minds, you know, the possibility of moving. But this is one of the things that anyone who's, you know, who's watching your channel, who's considering homeschooling, the move from school to homeschooling is such a gigantic paradigm shift in terms of the way you see the world that, yes is the short answer, but for us what it's done is it's changed our whole mindset from, okay, we've got 3 children, so when they start school, that's 15 years for the first one, then tag on the fact that the youngest one is 5 years younger, so that's about 20 years ahead of us that we are tied to a school system, maybe an area, maybe, you know, the life that we've got right now, but then maybe when they're older, we could consider this. All of that way of thinking that is normalized goes out the window, because that is no longer what your life looks like anymore. So long as you can earn money in some way to support your children's life. And that's another thing that homeschooling does, is it starts to make you question, do we need this big house and this big salary, or could we downsize completely, live on a riverboat. You know, it makes you think all these things. But in terms of living in another country, yes, you know, now that we are no longer tied to a system, the first thing we thought is, well, we could do world schooling, which really appeals to us, traveling around, visiting, maybe renting out our house for like a year and doing a year away, a year back, something like that. And in the UK, homeschooling is legal. And in France, homeschooling is legal. But in both countries, it's becoming increasingly scrutinized and increasingly the possibility of it being regulated in the same way that schools are, which I think would massively change the experience. And to be honest, you know, we feel so strongly about homeschooling now and are so gobsmacked by the kind of political refusal to engage with the obvious benefits to society of putting people out there into the world who are freer, happier, and showing skills that are not judged on maths, English, science, but they're judged on empathy and understanding and engagement with the planet, and stuff that actually would reduce crime rates, increase well-being, reduce obesity rates, all this sort of stuff. We find it very hard to see the world in the way that we used to when our children were at school. And so I think now, if things became stricter in France and the UK, we would start to look at a really different model of, you know, would it be possible for us to move to New Zealand, to Canada? I don't know, but you know what I mean? We would look at much more extreme, much more out the box options, because it's so fundamentally important to us now. I know you feel the same way, because
we
got
would
this
happily
in
move.
Germany, you know. Yeah.
So you mentioned some.
It's worrying. I mean, no, I'm listening. Sorry, there's a bit of interference, but I'm there.
You mentioned some advantages of homeschooling already. So is there anything else that you'd want to add to the benefits?
The benefits of homeschooling are sort of holistic, and I think that my children, at least the older two, although they're very different, they seem to be more traditionally academic kids. So my son is fascinated in maths and engineering type stuff, and he's got a car engine in the garage at the moment that he's dismantling and cleaning with his dad. And my daughter is a big reader like me. And so for my kids, there is no way in a school they could be reading and engaging with the kinds of things they want to learn. We speak French at home. One of the things we realized as soon as my daughter started school is she's spending 5 days a week, the majority of her day, speaking English now, which we can do at home just fine, but her French started falling behind because, of course, we speak in French at home. So that is the model of our family, but that's not the model for every family. And I think that that's what makes homeschooling so important to engage with properly, is that every child, every family is so unique, so different. What's right for one child and for one adult going into the world is going to be so different. We look at, for example, the over diagnosis and medicalization of ADHD. I don't know what it's called in Germany, but hyperactivity, same term. And lots of children, especially in the States actually, but it's more and more so in the UK, lots of children are diagnosed or coming from my teacher perspective, in the staff room, sort of pseudo-diagnosed, not really with an official diagnosis, but they've definitely got ADHD, can't sit still. And the reality is a lot of these children spend their school years being told off and being punished and being medicated for simply a personality that is a kinesthetic learner, that is someone that just wants to move. And we look at the different kinds of work that are out there for people, you know, work that is physical, work that is creative, work that involves interpersonal skills. It is total rubbish that what you require is exactly the same grades in all the same subjects, English, maths, science, You need a firm, universal grounding in all subjects to be able to function in life. That I absolutely think is a fallacy. And so I think one of the main advantages with homeschooling, I would say there are two. The first one is simply that your child can become who they naturally are meant to be, can follow their natural interests. It might not make sense at the beginning. You might not be able to see what's emerging, but sometimes there's a guy in the UK that everyone talks about. I'm sure you've heard of him in Germany, called Sir Ken Robinson, and he does a wonderful talk, do schools kill creativity? And in it he talks about this child that just can't sit still, tapping their toes, constant disruption in class. It turns out she was a dancer all along, and that's what she was meant to be, and she's a famous dancer now. And you just have, you know, in any ecosystem, it is the diversity that makes that ecosystem strong, not farming, you know, farmed agricultural landscapes with just the same product across wide. But look at the pandemic now. Look at the way that we live. Look at the way that we organize our society. You know, we've farmed ourselves to this total homogenous, unified sameness, and we all operate in a way that is unnatural to our species and that is just frankly short-sighted. What you want is lots of diversity, more localization, more children allowed to grow up and be who they want to be. That's the first thing. And then the second thing simply is the way that socialization in homeschooling is much more natural than what you have in school. So a lot of the bullying and a lot of the problems of what I call tribalism, but what I mean by that is over-reliance on your social group. It comes from the fact that when you send children to school, and they often cry, I mean, they really often do when they're young, they eventually stop crying. But that period, that year maybe where they're crying, it breaks something in the family. I really think it breaks a bond of respect and trust and everything that your parents have brought you into the world with. I think it damages that irreparably, really, I think. And so you have that then for the rest of your life. And what you then have is you're in a class in which the only reason you are with those 30 people, or at break time 150 people, are because you were born within 6 months either side of the date of that academic year. And there is no reason to group children this way. It has no link to their ability or their interests. And also because there is no natural pecking order that comes with age and wisdom and years. The only way that they can distinguish themselves against each other is by scrapping it out for some kind of leadership, you know, bully that kid, put that kid down, that kid's the leader, then it turns around, someone else is the leader. This just doesn't really happen with mixed age groups. It just doesn't. Where you have a group of, say, 20 homeschool children meeting at a local group, they might range in age from 2 years old or younger, right the way up to 18-year-olds who frankly are about to go to university, but they're still coming along because actually they have a younger brother or sister coming, or maybe it's quite useful for them to come and help out at the cafe, talk to some of the adults. They've got like a sort of pastoral role there. And they all find their place and they all engage with each other in a way that is real to human society, and that just naturally problems are resolved, older children step in, model better behavior for younger children, and a lot of the natural nastiness and the toxic stuff that people say, oh, that's just what children do, that's just how they are. What we've come to believe,
that's not the case.
It's not. It's just that we don't have a
that's
cultural.
What we've learned, you know, what we've experienced. That's, you know, but that's
exactly.
Not,
It's what we mean by that is it's what school is like. We don't know anything else, even though it's such a recent thing. Because our parents went to school, and probably our grandparents did too, it only takes 2 generations and we've lost it. We've lost what it used to be like before. We're just like, this is how it is now. And that's the way children are. And that's the end of it. And it's rubbish. But I didn't know this before. And I really hope anyone listening to this can start to see the world differently in a way that I didn't until I actually had a crisis point at my children's own school.
Yeah, hopefully. So if someone would start thinking about it more and would try to homeschool, like either in Germany illegally or going abroad doing that, what would you say, what are the challenges and what can happen? Like, I think I'll post the other question with this one. What can happen when you transition from normal school to homeschooling?
Well, I mean, we talk about in the UK a period of deschooling, and people all said to me, you know, you must give yourself a period of deschooling in which you are not putting any expectations on your children. You're just seeing how they emotionally really are settling having come out of school. Because I think if you never do school, like you're considering with your daughter, it's a different journey, I think. But if you are withdrawing your child from school, your children from school, this period of deschooling seems necessary. Now, what I would say to that is, although it's completely true, everyone has their own journey into it. And I think that for us at the beginning, probably for the first maybe month or two, we had lots of stuff around the house that looked like schoolwork, things like workbooks and maths and spellings books and things like this that were around the right level, with no force or timetable or expectation that this was what I had to do, but knowing that that is what's done in school, practicing what we would call in the UK like relaxed homeschooling. So a real consciousness of curriculum and all the subjects in the curriculum as defined by the national curriculum as opposed to life, and just being aware of that. And although that is now nowhere, that is not what we're like now. We are much more like, God, if you want to read, if you want to read Tolkien for 3 weeks straight, get on with it. Who cares about maths? Just do what you want to do in your moment, and we'll see where we are in 10 years' time. That's where we are now. But at the beginning, we needed that structure because otherwise it would have felt too much. Dropping out of the school system and everything that goes with it. We live in a small village, so it's quite a big deal. So it's like we're the family that moved to the small village from London, so we were already outsiders, and then we decided within a year that the school wasn't for our child, but now we're not doing school. It's been a sort of lots of social stuff to work with, and so for us at the beginning, having a bit of what felt familiar was really necessary. Now, I think our children really took to homeschooling. They loved it, and our journey has been very easy, and we feel very blessed with that. But we do know people, we have friends who literally have just made the same decision around the same time as us, sort of, I wouldn't say inspired by us, but it always really helps when you see another family do it and you think, oh, it's possible. So weirdly, we had like 2 or 3 different families that we knew who we'd lived next to in London came to visit us after we dropped out of school, just spent the weekend with us and went home and withdrew their kids. So that's how, so I've got this like little network, and we all feel the same way, and we're all really similar. And it hasn't been the same journey for all of them. And what I would say is, my observation is that the greater the trauma and the greater the stress that school has been for your child, the more you can expect a kickback when you take them out. That might mean that you get a lot of emotional explosions that weren't happening before, but that now that your child feels safe, they can do it. You might get your child you might get your child passively not wanting to do anything, wanting to just watch tons of TV and not really engage with anything that you define as work. And I think to give yourself a really good stretch to just relax and not put pressure on your child and not let anyone be around your child who is going to put pressure on them, like sometimes grandparents do, is really important. And I think that once you settle, and the ground always does settle, even when you read these books, my book, the one that I've just written, was inspired by a book in the UK called Free Range Education, written by Terry Dougherty, and in it are stories of people who've come to the end of their homeschooling journey and who are reflecting. Some of the people are reflecting on 18 years of homeschooling or less if they've taken them out of school, and on sometimes 5 or 6 years in which their child appeared to be doing nothing, but it all turned out well in the end. And I think however long it takes you to get to that equilibrium with your child, when you do, you realize how worth it is, and you realize how putting that groundwork in now is undoing damage that as adults we sometimes spend the whole of our adult life working on undoing.
And probably we'll die not knowing, what homeschool did to us.
Exactly. So I think that's just so important, is just to remember that a year of your child's life where they aren't touching, let's say, what you're considering with your schooled mentality. Don't get me wrong here, I am schooled. Like, I'm not saying I'm not. I've grown up as a teacher. I was very academic at school. I'm deschooling all the time, and I will have to probably my whole life. But when we look at our children and we think, oh, they haven't read this week, they haven't done maths this week, they haven't done whatever this week, obviously it doesn't matter if some bigger emotional process is going on, that if they don't resolve it now, they will not function the way that they could potentially function in their adult lives. So that's where I'm at now with it. And that is sort of what me and the community of people around me who've all done this around the same time, what we're all discussing is just that thing of how long it takes, and it's different for all of us, but that when you start to get there with your child, you get your child back. You know, you get back the person that you remember. And it's not like going backwards in time and saying, oh, well, now my child's a little baby again. Not at all. But it's like that affected social person that came through school that wasn't really who your child was sort of fades away. And the sense of who that personality really is and can be shines through. And it's really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And yeah, I just hope more and more people are going to do it, definitely, in order to change the school system as it is.
Exactly. For children, there are always going to be economic reasons, the way that work and life is structured, and families for whom also emotionally and for them as parents, homeschooling wouldn't be right. But I would think that at least half of the families with children in school could do with homeschooling, and it would be fantastic for their families. Whatever people think about their working arrangements, there are always ways that you can organize your work and change the way you work to make homeschooling work for you. I did an interview for my podcast with a wonderful Black American homeschooling mum called Tirsa. She's on Twitter, and she homeschools 4 children because she believes that the American school system, I'm absolutely sure she's right, is institutionally racist. And her husband and her, they both work shift work, so it's not easy. But if they can do it, anyone can do it. Because, you know, she said, you know, you think that I'm lounging around just homeschooling my child. No, I work shift work. I work nights. When I'm not work, I come home, I tag team with my husband. He goes off to work. But we do it because we believe so fundamentally in it. So it is possible. But there will always be children in the school system. And I think the more people show support for homeschooling, the more the school system will have to change. And then we'll have a happier society, because, you know, so many problems are born in the school system, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your book? What can people expect?
Yeah. So The Case for Homeschooling is published with Hawthorne Press. They are fantastic, and it was such a strange journey how we got there, because I've always tinkered around with writing and thought maybe I might want to, you know, be a fiction writer, or I might want to do this, might want to do that. And anyway, then I started working as a teacher, and I just let all writing drop. And I was just like, this is not where my head's at right now. I am marking, and then I had my kids, blah, 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 and then started homeschooling. And I fell in love with Free Range Education by Terry Doughty, published by Hawthorne Press, which is 20 years old, you know, so it's a little out of date for our time, but I love the book. We speak French at home, and we're thinking about moving to France. So I contacted Martin, who's who it's his company, Hawthorne Press, and I said, oh, I love this book, Martin. Like, would you like me to translate it into French? You know, I just think France could do with this. France, it has such a small homeschooling community. They it's in no way as big and popular as it is here, and I feel like the French system is actually more repressive than it is here. The French system, very, very like you know, very restrictive, very like you know, you learn this in this year and only in this year, and until you can count to 10 on your fingers, there's no need for you to know any numbers. I mean, this is what I've been told, above or below it. It's a bit strange. So anyway, I thought, God, that France could do with a book like this to just open up people's minds to, you know. And anyway, so we contacted Terry. Terry wasn't keen on a translation. And Martin started talking with his in-house editor about, oh, but it seems like the time is right for another book. This was before COVID. This was like Christmas, you know. And so I was in on this email, and at the time, you know, I wasn't working in schools, but I was doing tutoring, I was doing exam marking, and I was doing a bit of, you know, study notes writing for websites that do, you know, study notes for like sixth formers and things like that. And I just looked at my husband and I said, I've got to be cheeky and just say, I love homeschooling. I think I can write. I think I've got things to say. What do you think? Yeah. And anyway, so I showed him my blog, which was really just being born. And it's homeschoolguru.org, and it's a silly name. And the thing was, the website was born, the blog was born out of me and these friends of mine, 4 or 5 friends, who came to stay with us for the weekend and went home and withdrew their kids from school. So they were like, you need a website. And that's where the blog came from. So even though it seems silly now looking back on it, it made sense at the time. It was sort of like just a little bunch of us that just all kind of fed into each other. And really, they were the only people reading my blog at that point. Anyway, and so Martin was like, no, we like it. We like how you write. Let's have a go. Well, I can tell you, Julia, writing a book is not that easy at all. And I wrote, oh my God, I wrote 2 full drafts, and it came back to me and was just like, this is not what we're looking for. And I had to go away. And this was we'd just gone into lockdown. So in March, I had to go away and just do this like soul searching, like, what is it that I really want to say about homeschooling? And what I realized about it was that what gives my book, what makes my book different from a lot of homeschooling books that you get is my insight as a teacher. And my message is absolutely not that as a teacher, I know better about education. No. And it's not that you need to be a teacher to home educate at all. It's more about taking what I know about educating and what I know about the way the school system is and putting it against what I have learned by a sudden, rush of information about homeschooling. And it's funny because it took me like 6 months of going back and forth with drafting to realize that this talking about it as a teacher and talking about it as almost like a professional standing back and looking at my own children, the children I've met, was what I needed to do. And the reason that I have been shying away from it and not wanting to write from that angle is because I hated teaching so much and I hated school so much that I wanted to like distance myself from that. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be that person. I just didn't want that to be me. But actually, that's my voice in the book. And it's been really cathartic, really cathartic. If you read the book, you'll read a lot of information about the British school system, stuff that I'm sure a lot of teachers would agree with, but are not particularly happy that it's come out, that it's, problems with the system, the kind of fallacy of, exam standardization and moderation and lots of things that are just saying it like it is. It's just a job. It's ridiculous to idealize these people and imagine that they're all saints who love kids and who want everything to be, oh my God, everyone goes to the pub on a Thursday night and everyone's tired like everyone else. And it's so there's a lot of that reality of the system. Lots of storytelling goes on, storytelling about homeschool children, storytelling about school children that I remember. And then it breaks it down into like what I know about learning and what I know about teacher training and how children learn best and how all teachers learn these fundamental things about how children behave, how children learn, how best to educate. We all believe the same thing, but it cannot be done in school. And I explain why. And it can be done in home educating. And again, I explain why. And that's probably the best way to look at the book, and it's full of stories. And in the middle, there are, I've forgotten, 12, 14 wonderful stories by contributors to the book about their home education journeys, looking back, children themselves who are home educated. I've got a wonderful, let me think, how old is she? I think she's 12-year-old, who's written a wonderful section as well. And it's just full of wonderful stories and wonderful different ways to home educate, different ways in to just get the ball rolling and get you thinking, what would work for me? Just cherry pick what works for you and brush the rest to the side. Yeah.
Sounds very inspiring. I'm definitely going to read it and I'm definitely going to try to, spread the message.
Thank you.
And it's been very, very inspiring to talk to you. And it's amazing how, like, even in the UK where homeschooling is not like restricted, like, I think basically it's one of the freest countries, isn't it? Like maybe
I think it's very popular in America, very popular in the UK. I think like everywhere, the pandemic has created a political response that is quite restrictive. Yeah.
So what's their talk about making it more restrictive, making it more compulsory, like to have exams and stuff?
Yes. Sorry. Do you mean
in the UK?
Yeah.
Like before COVID.
Yeah. So we have this school regulator in the UK called Ofsted, and Ofsted.
I know. Ofsted because my husband, He's been doing teacher training in the UK. Yeah.
I see. Well, so Ofsted was created in the 90s. The 90s was a time of a lot of kind of the rise of a lot of what we call audit culture. So a lot of regulating groups were established in the 90s, and that was a real time of things need to be regulated. There need to be standards, and Ofsted was born in the kind of latter part of that. And guys, no, I'm doing it.
We can also
this is real. Don't worry, it's fine. Wait a second, please. It's real, you know. We're homeschooling.
So I'm sure my door's going to pop up in any second now. So.
It's fine. They just probably want to know if they can put pizzas in the oven. Anyway, so Ofsted regulates schools, and Ofsted has quite fixed ideas about what should be happening in schools in terms of safeguarding, in terms of curriculum, in terms of the way in which they assess schools. It's not all rubbish. It's just that it's very prescriptive, and it's a bit of a game as to how well you play by the Ofsted criteria and get the result that you want from the school, or how much you're focusing on really the children. And lots of schools where they're really just getting on with teaching and learning, and there's quite a natural, organic atmosphere happening in the school, get, you know, destroyed by Ofsted. And schools like the ones that I've worked in, and there are more than one school that I've worked in, so I'm not calling any particular school out here, get, you know, outstanding top criteria. And everyone who's working in that school knows that a lot of paper pushing and admin has gone into that, not really what you'd call genuinely improving lives for children.
Yeah.
So the problem at the moment is that Ofsted, and this is prior to the pandemic, has been kind of extending its reach into early years in education, into apprenticeships, into other areas. And their most recent kind of pledge is to start looking into regulating homeschooling and illegal schools. And the way that this was announced, as if homeschooling and legal schools are somehow in any way comparable, which they're not, of course, is worrying. And it's also worrying that we have in the UK a problem where children, and it's happening less now because the government have, you know, are onto it. But if you rewind a couple of years, a lot of children who were behaviorally disruptive in schools and whose results looked like they were going to destroy, you know, school results for that class, for that cohort. In some schools, these children were encouraged to do what's called off-rolling, so home educate, basically to get rid of them so that it won't affect the school results. And the problem with this is that although I'm all for home educating and I'm all for every family can do it, and in fact, some of the families that people think, oh, but that family should, that shouldn't, they really should. And it would be healing for the family, and it would be actually improve the whole family experience rather than saying, oh, well, this family are not the kind of demographic for that. I think that's rubbish. But the point is, when you're thrown into it like that, as if you're just being scraped off the surface of the school and having your difficult child slung back at you with not a lot of support, it's not going to look like homeschooling. It's going to look like, you know, probably playing on your Xbox, or risking, depending on your area, being affiliated into a gang or something like that. And so if these children who actually have been failed by the school system and thrown with no preparation or no kind of sense of what homeschooling can be like into homeschooling, if these children are monitored as part of monitoring homeschooling, that is going to affect a vision of what homeschooling looks like, which is actually being created by the government, you know, and being created by Ofsted, who put pressure on schools and cause schools to make these crazy decisions. So we're not there yet, but I think that anyone who is home educating is watching carefully to see how this plays out, because there is a real lack of understanding of any alternative model to education, other than the national curriculum, which has only existed for like 25 years. It's oh no, a little more than 25 years, but you know, there's a real resistance to that. There's a school, there's a you know, the Steiner school movement. Do you have that in Germany as well? Steiner schools.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Well, there's a real. You call them what?
Waldorfschulen, like the We call them different. Yeah.
Wagner, yeah. So it's there's a real drive on the part of Ofsted to close these schools down in the UK, and they've more or less made that explicit that they don't like Steiner pedagogy. And for example, I was looking at a book written by Richard House, who specializes in, looking into the kind of looking into, in his book, he's really looking into the content, the detail of the Ofsted report from his background as a professor in psychology, and also from his experience of working in Steiner schools himself. He's got a whole lot of background in writing. He's a quite a big name in the academic world, actually. And his book is called Pushing Back to Ofsted, and he literally goes through bullet point by bullet point the words of the Ofsted report directed to Winstone Steiner School, I think it's called, which was shut down earlier this year by Ofsted. And it's just fascinating because, just for example, one point is that they do not like the fact that there is no phonics instruction for children in reception and year one.
Yeah.
But this is completely against Steiner ethos. Steiner ethos does not believe in it for a very legitimate, grounded, researched and proven educational reasons. They don't even begin until they're 7 or 8 and go on to often become better readers, bigger lovers of books. You look at the statistics of children in countries more modeled around this way of learning, and actually library book withdrawals are way higher than in the UK for the average citizen. It's a much more literate and academic country. It's just like rubbishing an ideal that you don't even understand. And so obviously we're a little scared in the homeschooling community that we're going to be treated the same way.
I think I might need to be going now, but I definitely have the feeling we're going to have another interview sometime soon.
I've loved this. It's so nice talking to you and connecting with you, Julia.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, and see you very soon.
You too. Thank you so much, Hamyon.